everyone, welcome back to Wild and Free Art. Today I am going to show you a process video of how I made this journal with a faux corset binding. But before we start looking at how I made this journal, I just wanted to say that I have created a new Facebook group to help support this channel. And I would really appreciate it if you could join. It's called Create Wildly. You can find the link below. All right, now back to the process. So here you can see me with a good sized piece of chipboard that I believe I got from the back of a sketch pad. You can use any kind of chipboard that you have, as long as it's pretty solid. You could make this into a soft cover as long as the spine is fairly solid. So here you're just seeing me as I measure and mark the halfway point in order to cut the two cover pieces and the spine. So now I've got the cover pieces ready to go. I am going to get another piece of chipboard and I am going to cut the spine. Now the spine needs to be quite thick because you need to also calculate not just the space of your signatures, but also the space of the holes that you're going to need and the grommets that you are going to be putting down both sides to imitate the corset. So what I would suggest is to first off decide how many signatures you want and measure that. I think I was like about 2 inches for that, and then I added about 1/2 inch to each side to put in the grommets. Okay, so now I have my fabric pieces that I want to use for the cover, and I am just fiddling with them a little bit to figure out the best placement and how I want them to be. So having decided more or less on the placement, I am now taking all the pieces off in order to attach them to the cover. So since each cover is independent, you will need to wrap each one separately with whatever it is that you want to use as your cover. And remember, again, with the covers, when you're deciding on how you want to decorate it and what you want to put on it, remember that you will have the grommets and the holes on each side of the front and the back cover. So keep that into consideration. Measure out about 1/2 inch or a couple centimeters of space, depending on the size of your grommets, and consider that when you're decorating the cover. Don't forget to also cover your spine again with your cloth or paper that you're using, just like you would do with your covers. Okay, so after having allowed everything to dry, cover and spine, it's time to take the measurements and add our grommets or metal reinforcers, or I am sure they have another name that right now I can't think of. So basically, first thing you need to do is decide how many holes you want for your lace to go through on both sides. And this is kind of an important part when you're measuring. Take your time, because the holes that you make on the spine have to match up exactly with the holes that you make on the front and back covers. So for this, I would, take your time, use a ruler, and make sure that you mark everything. Make sure you mark everything top, so that you don't accidentally invert the covers or the spine and put it on the wrong way around. Remember to leave some space from the top and the bottom of your spine and covers, and from the edges also. So here you can see me. I am just putting on one of the grommets to measure it and check the distance and make sure that I have a decent distance between each line. Okay, so now that I have everything all measured out and marked, it's time to set and put in the eyelets or grommets, whatever you have. I do not have a crocodile. I have an old-fashioned system, which is the hammer and the punch tool, and that is how I do it. You can set them using whatever tool you happen to have. Then we will move on to the next step. So before I start lacing up the sides, I decided to finish embellishing the cover. Because of the way I had to set the eyelets, I made sure that the covers were fairly flat and that nothing could get ruined before actually hammering everything in. But obviously, if you have a crocodile, you could always do the decoration beforehand and finish the covers as you want them. Obviously, yeah, it's a personal choice. But here I've decided to finish embellishing my cover first, and then I'm going to start lacing in the corset stitch. Okay, so here I finished embellishing everything, and basically I've decided to do the corset stitch. Not really, it's actually lacing. So basically you're just pulling it in through the top and making sure you have even sides on both ends, and then you're going to zigzag going down to the bottom, skipping one hole each time. And then you're going to do the same on the opposite side, pretty much like lacing shoes. But do not tie it yet, because I tie it at the very end after I've stitched in all my signatures and everything, because that way you can do any adjusting that you need to do for the thickness and the width, and give it any space that it needs. So again, doing the other side again, I used a stretchy type of vintage lace. You could use ribbon or string or anything that you really want. So the next step that I did was to start decorating some pieces of heavier cardstock to use as my end papers on the inside of the front cover. I used some coffee, and then I inked up the edges a little bit and just had a bit of fun messing around with different ways of decorating the end papers to grunge them up a bit. So So having finished making the end papers, I decided it was time to also make a little piece to cover my spine. Obviously you have all your pencil marks there. You could erase it and just leave it as is, but I decided to cover it, and in covering it also you have to remember to consider you have your eyelets there, so it will need to be thinner than the actual width of the spine. So here I'm just going to measure it and cut the piece of cardstock to size. Having cut the spine cover, I'm now choosing the papers I want to put in my signatures. Okay, now I've chosen all my signatures and it's time to sew them in. So my first step is to make a template and then to punch the holes. Now, as you see, I have sewn my internal spine to a piece of fabric, and that fabric is going to be attached to the end pages that you'll see in a while. So here I have punched my holes in my signatures, I'm measuring out my thread, and I've decided to do a Coptic stitch binding. I will link the tutorial for Coptic stitch binding below. After I finished sewing everything in, I decided to glue it to make it a little bit extra strong. So I've put it into my book press and covered it in lace and done a couple layers of glue, allowing it to dry in between each layer. This helps to strengthen the binding and stops pages from falling out, especially when you're hiding the binding like I am in this type of book. It's just an extra bonus thing to do. The next step after everything is dry is to glue your text block into your book. So at this point I have trimmed the edges of my fabric, glued them in, and left them to dry. As you can see, I didn't film that part for some reason, but I've glued them I've beveled the edges, glued them in, and left it to dry with something holding my signatures up. Then I'm going to add my end papers, which I have prepared off screen. I made a little pocket on one of them, and I believe I put a belly band on the other. So now I'm just going to add my end papers and put a weight on them to allow them to fully dry. After leaving everything to dry overnight on a weight, it is time to add the final touches to the book, and that is finally tying up the corset binding. So here I'm just tightening everything, making sure it's all nice and straight. And as you can see, my book is quite chunky, so you can see that there is a gap between the spine hinges and the spine, and the front and back covers, which is covered by the cloth that I used to bind in the text block. So make sure it's a fabric that you like. It can be in contrast, it can be complementary, it can be however you want it. So just pull everything to the right tightness and just tie it off in a bow or in a knot. I then added beads to the end of mine after I trimmed them, and that was the book complete. I hope you've enjoyed this process video. I will be sharing another flip through once it's fully decorated, and this journal will then be available for sale in my Etsy shop. If you did enjoy this, please feel free to like and subscribe, leave a comment below if you have any questions, and thank you so much again for watching. Happy crafting, everybody.